Our next speaker, Rahul Shivshankar, began his journalism career over 2 decades ago, from a beat reporter in the Times of India to taking the leadership mantle at Times Now. Rahul's career has spanned both print and electronic media. Over the years, Rahul Shivshankar has won numerous awards and has been invited to participate in several high-profile panel discussions. To mention only a few, he was awarded with Editor-in-Chief of the Year English at the 14th edition of the ENBA Awards. India Upfront, anchored by Rahul, a very popular program which echoes his commitment to bringing back the focus on hard facts and separate news from rhetoric, bagged gold at the ENBA Awards for the Best Primetime Show English in the year 2021 and 2022. Rahul has also conceived and anchors the highly viewed and critically appreciated news show Converse, which also won the Best Talk Show English at the ENBA Awards. In 2005, Rahul was part of the original core team that launched India's most watched TV channel, Times Now. Today, as editor-in-chief of Times Now, he has played a pivotal role in catapulting the channel to its next level. He frequently contributes to the blogs section of Times of India. Rahul Shivshankar will now speak on media and free speech constraints.
So many of you here, and thank you for indulging me with your patience. It's not often that I get to be amongst people, potential viewers, and therefore I'm going to speak less and respond to your questions. So I've decided to pen down a few of my thoughts so I'm not all over the place like I am on national news TV every night. I have to say I'm unusually nervous. I'm nervous because it's not often that I'm called upon to tell the journalist side of the story on media and free speech constraints. The last I was this nervous, believe it or not, was when I sought an interview with Rahul Gandhi in the late 2013. Let me hasten to add, I was extremely nervous for him, not myself. If you recall, at that time, he had distinguished himself as a particularly conscientious politician. He had torn up an ordinance, you see. And I feared that he might do the same with my question paper. I was so nervous what the public, all of you, might think of him. How you would perceive him. After all, the last thing I wanted was for the public to think that the great hope of India's future was a blue, true-blooded Gandhi. After all, why would he want to be bracketed alongside his great Dada Nehru, Dadi Indira, and Dad Rajiv, who all in their modest ways tried to fetter, intimidate, and plot against free speech and other freedoms, even transparency. This is not how Rahul sees himself, of course. At least not in 2013 and not even now in 2022. I mean, he told us just 2 days back that he would never want to capture the levers of free democratic India institutions like Mr. Modi has done to win an election, to rig an election. In the end, he didn't give me the interview. And I think he was right. I mean, why would a true Democrat want to give me, a well-wisher, who was more interested in his public image, an interview? Gandhi media, you see. Why would you want to speak to Gandhi media? Okay, my sarcastic takedown of Rahulji today is not intended to mock him. It's just my way of ridiculing Lutyens media, or whatever you want to call it, for calling me Modi media, me, a once Rahul Gandhi well-wisher. These Lutyen media sorts have really never known who their friends are. Have they? I'm sure some of you will all agree. Ingrates they are, absolute ingrates. 30 years ago, I bet, caught between Doordarshan and All India Radio, you could not have thought that the media sector one day would become the fastest diversifying aspect of India's economy. I mean, all those confounding verticals the media has spawned, Godi media, Lutyens media, NDPT media, Pliant media, Haywire media, Sanghi media, paid media, squint and you'll miss it in print media, WhatsApp University media, fake media, fact-checker media. I can't keep count, and I bet you can't either. Arey bhai, as Dr. Ranganathan might say, and he says quite often on my show, news hi to hai. It isn't like you are on Tinder looking for who to spend an evening with. Relax, calm down, chill. Well, with the proliferation of digital media, the entrenched lobby that I have alluded to has also acquired a dog whistle. All of this has happened in the past. You've seen various journalists being externed, blackballed, labeled. But this is really at a different level, because this is happening on a massive scale. And there are campaigns against ideologically opposed journalists who you don't agree with from within. Hence all the abuse, the labeling, Godi, Modi, and Bodhi media, all of that happens, and it can severely dent your credibility at a very different level. The smoke and daggers, the smoke and mirrors games used to happen in small parlor rooms, little places here and there, and things really didn't leach out into the public, but now it does. With an entire ecosystem plunging the dagger in your back, government and parties, both at center and state level, now feel emboldened to join the fun. The other is open to victimization. Cancelling out ensures a free-for-all. There's no united press corps standing behind the journalists. In fact, after the prime ministership and the chief ministership of states, the most contested election, as I was telling someone, is for the Editors Guild of India. So you can, at some level, pack your own fellow ideologues on this panel and then selectively call out whoever you want to or stand up for whoever you want to. It's become that bad. Just as a lion thrown out of the pride is fair picking for the hyenas, the other is open to victimization. This is a concern, as when the inability to stand together to defend press freedoms without preconditions weakens, so does fundamentally the cause of free press, taking on governments, entrenched interests, seeking accountability, taking a divergent, dissenting stand becomes so much more difficult. You might be doing the right thing, but because you're not doing it by a section of your colleagues, you will be attacked, thrown out to the hyenas. There's another dimension to the restraint on free speech that I'd like to talk about. I began by mentioning how the higher courts in this country had battered in favor of media freedoms in the build-up to the First Amendment of the Constitution. Today, the judiciary likes to lecture the media about what honest journalism is or a journalist should be, about business interests and its impacts on media's independence and why we don't produce enough Pulitzer Prize winners. I mean, even that's their preoccupation, but I welcome this criticism, but not without reminding distinguished members of the judiciary that transparency is best when it's practiced by those most ardently pushing for it. So perhaps Milords could revisit the law of contempt, which can also be used to muzzle an objective analysis of their own working, their own peccadillos. The media can be freer than it is in India, and there's no doubt about that, ladies and gentlemen. But only if its own chieftains truly embrace ideological pluralism and transparency. I'll just leave it at this. The more I say would be a repetition of what I've already sort of referred to as this inquisition, as this insider attack. Because as I said, the choice is a hallmark, of mature democracies. The more the platforms, the more the news, greater the variety of views. Why wouldn't anyone welcome that? I mean, why would the Liberal Democrats of Lutyens want to cancel me or limit viewers' choice? Why would they sort of go against what they believe? I was called an Islamophobe recently, and I was quite mystified for what I referred to recently as the Red Fort Republicanism of Independence Day. I mean, why would you want to debate why we are still stuck watching prime ministers unfurl the national tricolour from the ramparts of a red fort? The same red fort is a symbol of imperialism and not republicanism. Aren't there several other sites with far greater claims to inclusiveness that contributed to evolving our sense of nationhood? I mean, think about it. There could be so many other backdrops. Think of Champaran or the hallowed Azad Maidan or the salty flats of Dandi or the walls of Jallianwala Bagh that still bear the scars of British imperial contempt for our brownskins. But we have this annual ritual. And the reason I said so was because I believe that Independence Day needs to be about us, not about some distant figure who is unfurling a flag from this sort of red fort. And I can understand the need for continuity in a republic that is still sort of young enough and has contentious sort of battles over its identity. I can understand that. We want to, on the 15th of August, put on the TV and feel reassured. The state is still there. He's unfurling the flag. Oh, it's the red fort. That means, we're still independent. I get that. But if someone wants to look a little beyond, bring a little bit of something else to it, why should he be called an Islamophobe? But the wokery, and I like to use this word, does love to take me apart for daring to argue against this. They hate my arguing for inclusiveness. I find it bizarre. And when I was asked to speak about media and free speech constraints, I realized it isn't the government of the day that I need to fear. It's the cliques within. The frail egos in my own fraternity that don't want to see others emerge and challenge the fussy and frosty narratives and rituals of Lutyens' privilegencia. You see, all government wants to fetter the media. They all do, believe me. Many have called in the previous administrations. Many will continue to call. They will ask you to do this, to do that. At the end of the day, it's for you to draw the line as an editor. The governments at the time of Nehru in the 50s, rattled by criticism of press and the courts, he did it. K.R. Malkani of The Organizer and the editor of The Organizer is right here. And Ramesh Thapar of Crossroads on the left had both successfully challenged attempts on the part of the government to muzzle them. The courts ruled in their favor. This left an entitled Jawaharlal Nehru to introduce the First Amendment to the Constitution that crippled free speech, and we are still laboring from the consequences of loosely worded legislation. More than 2 decades later, during the emergency, free media and speech died only to rise again, so much so that Rajiv Gandhi had to roll back or bury a pernicious attack on free speech being brought through legislation. So turf war between media and government, whether at the state or the center, will keep continuing. It'll go on till we are a democracy. After all, which government doesn't want to control the narrative? At the end, it's up to, as I said, the editor to decide where he or she will draw the Lakshman Rekha. And any editor of editorial integrity, I can say this with a degree of self-assuredness. Any editor who has any pretensions to integrity would not want their independence curtailed because someone's picked up a phone. Actually, they resent it, to be honest. But what if the enemy sits within your own fraternity? What if one side within the media resorts to demonizing and discrediting the other just because they want to monopolize who gets to speak to the public, to the government, when, why, where, and what? They want to be the arbiters. So the more you exercise your right to free speech and expression, the more you take on somebody from one side or the other side will hit back and push back, isolate you, label you. And that's the biggest constraint on free speech. Because after a point, even the most committed will get beaten down. He won't risk it. As I said, the Hyena syndrome starts playing on you. I'm outed, I'm external, no one's going to stand up for me, and it's happening all around us, on either sides. I'm not talking about here being partisan. You have a government going after X, you have the other government going after Y, you have one political party in the opposition going after X, you might have the one in the ruling government going after Y, and no one's speaking up because everyone is so proprietorial about their little turfs. So today, the greatest fetters on free speech are being applied by journalists themselves. I mean, the other day, I'm not usually one to betray confidences, but I rang up Dr. Ranganathan and I was really worried, this time for myself. I said, after Nupur, wonder what's going to happen. Some madcap is going to walk into our studios and on live television do what they did at, the French newspaper. And I said that might just happen, or the Danish newspaper, or what have you. It might just happen here, so just let's tone it down a little bit. He says, what is there to tone down? I'm speaking the fact. And I said, yeah, but we've got lunatics out there who mix up the fact with hate. So let's be a little careful. I can't see Doc here, but I must say I've now decided, there he is, yeah, pointed out by someone next to him. He's very self-effacing. But I must say that, I understood where he was coming from, and now I've decided, forget it. If some people are not mature enough to understand, that's their problem, not mine. So as I said, I'll leave it at this. I really want to hear from you, and I want to answer some questions, because I can't say everything that I would want to say unprompted sometimes. So please.
Hi, Rahul. My name is Sudeep. My question is, you spoke about the conflict between the state and the journalist. But how real is the conflict between the ownership of channels or media houses and the freedom of speech? Especially with, the economy going bigger, money becoming more important. How real an elephant this is in the room?
I'm a salaried employee. Look, I'll be honest. It's not as if there are no sensitive touch points. There are sensitive touch points for everyone, even for the judiciary. Let me tell you that. Have I ever personally got a telephone call from the proprietors to do this or that? No, never. In fact, the one time I was called in was, and this, goes against counter-narrative or the narrative that is put out about Times Now. On one particular issue, I was told, when certain journalists during COVID times were being hectored, so we must stand up. It doesn't matter if they're on this side or that side. We've got to stand up. This is about the soul of journalism. This is about our ability to speak. So feel no fears at any level if you speak out. And we ran actually a campaign. It was called Janta Mange Jawab. So a colloquialized campaign. Why? Because at that time, you were not just wanting jawabs, you were wanting oxygen. And it became incumbent to ask those questions, even if it grated against anyone's sense of either entitlement or do-gooding. So we said, look, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. We'll take it on our chins. What can we lose? A few crores in advertisements, but we don't want to lose public goodwill. And I'm very proud. And I've been part of some meetings where I have seen media owners grovel when they've been asked to bend. Witness this. We probably will never be called for another one, but it doesn't matter. It's important to say, but I haven't seen that happening with the Times Group. So I can only speak for my organization, sir. So, I'm sure that there are problems. I mean, we have now a situation where we have editors who are also businessmen, and it's been happening in the past. It's happened in the past too, but I believe we're in a different time when commerce also does matter. Business interests do get hit. So there is some logic in people saying that, okay, diversified business interests, this, that, the other, can have an impact on editorial, etc. But again, it comes down to the company to create those walls between marketing and sales and editorial. Yes, please.
Hi, Rahul. Anand here.
Yeah, okay. You're delighting in this today, aren't you?
And I'm going to give you only 30 seconds to respond.
Right.
Now, I have two questions. First of all, wonderful articulation of the whole topic. But what, according to you, is more disturbing, censorship or self-censorship? And the second connecting question that I ask is because you're one of the very, very few, probably a handful, even less, journalists who not only write for the print but also are in the news in the channels. So visual as well as times you write your column. So the question is the two. Sort of, let me put it gently, nudges you more to be careful about what you write. And I say this because we had Kanchan Da, and Kanchan Da once wrote an article that was titled Ram Rajya or Rome Rajya. And the very next day, there was a call from Sonia Gandhi's office where her PA, who's, by the way, I think facing arrest right now for amassing illegal properties. No, not Sonia Gandhi, her PA. Kanchan Da was sacked from his job. He was out on the streets with family and kids. So, A, which is more problematic according to you, censorship and self-censorship? And B, which amongst the two, print or the visual media, tries to curtail your freedoms more? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I'm going to be honest because I have nothing to lose, really, quite frankly. I hope that answers the second part of your question, because if I was looking for some sinecures or if I was looking for money, quite frankly, I would be much more guarded than I am here today. It doesn't matter. I hate being on television. I don't like TV, to be very honest. But I'm there because I want to send out a message on particular issues which I don't believe get reported. So I do it out of a sense of compulsion. I've told my bosses many times I don't want to do any show. Hopefully one day they'll agree. I love writing because it allows you to think things through. It also tempers your own exuberance or your sense of perhaps untrammeled commentary, because you constantly, as you write a line, have to justify what you're writing because you're imagining what the counter would be. So you end up being more nuanced, call it what you want to. And I appreciate the sheer effort, the thinking that goes into the process of writing. Right from thinking of the headline, and I can get quite proprietorial about that. Because sometimes you can say a lot more in the headline than you can say in the body of the piece. So yes, I began my career as a print journalist, and I valued that. But coming back to your first question, as I said, right now, I can handle the government's calling, and state governments. There's been a state of emergency that was imposed in a particular state and barely got commented upon. It's as bad as that. And I can understand why, because there's advertising and this and that, and people might say, oh, zip up, why lose? And, some people have not so deep pockets and so on and so forth, or perhaps very large pockets. But to be honest, I feel right now we're at a point, and I made this comment earlier to another gathering of journalists at an event. The problem is actually within. I have seen the NBA, or whatever you call it, taking a position against a particular news channel because they're ideologically, or some people on the jury or whatever it is, ideologically sort of opposed to that particular channel, so they will go out of their way to make an example out of that channel, and on the other side would be less censorious. So what does that do? That sort of is amplified, as I said, in press and everywhere, and deliberately people will pick that up and splash it, hurts your credibility. So the next time you'll say, I don't want to get into this. So forget it. Let this story go. It's not worth it anymore. And over a period of time, there are many stories that just go. I always put the public interest first. At least that's what we were taught. I never do a sting, for example, where the public interest is not involved. I'm not interested in going out there and, there are certain stings that certain channels do at the behest of a certain party to another party to show how that particular party is on the take or what have you. I won't do that unless there is a public interest dimension. If they're doing it to suborn, some institution, or if they're doing it to subvert our democracy, then yes. So I believe right now a large number of newsrooms are worried. There was a huge debate in our newsroom the other day about Mohammed Zubair's second brazen attempt at quoting the law. And people said, no, you shouldn't do this because, again, we'll have disproportionate interests. There's some couple of yellow rags who will write about us and we're done with it. I mean, why are you sort of, I said, no, let's do it because we must know who our fact checkers are. So I did. No one else did. It was conveniently ignored. Some people tweeted here and there. Conveniently ignored. I think one of our panelists, Ayyar Mitra, was there that day. Abhijit, I don't know if he's here this morning, but he was on that show. And it was difficult because I know that the entire fraternity, even those who stood surety for him, would go after me. But it's worth the risk.
A quick announcement, exclusively for speakers, delegates, and Team PLF. Lunch will be served on the 7th floor of the hotel building. I repeat, this announcement is exclusively for speakers, delegates, and Team PLF.
Now, can I ask you a question?
Please, sir.
You can hear me. So many people I know find the truth. Many I know who also revel in lies. You being in the journalism, how do you manage to handle your biases and take 100 people and say, whether we go to his room, find a beautiful quotation which says, cling to truth. How do you manage that? I know many of my friends stick to truth in the media, but how do you manage the biases and prejudices so that you can handle truth?
Look, my job is not to manage my own biases. My job is to be as close to the truth by producing hard facts. So if a story is based on certain facts, the arguments that you build on those hard facts will be strong. I like to take a position. I like to put my bias out there because how can I be a journalist if I'm going to be completely disconnected from something? I'm sorry, I sort of think of journalism slightly differently, especially the show I do. I'm not talking about vanilla reporting. I'm talking about a talk show where I see myself as somebody who must stand for certain values based on immutable hard facts that can be verified. So I open it out. I ask a question and I take back I hope to elicit answers. I might disagree with those panelists. Where I, of course, draw the line is when they get personal, because I never got personal with them. I've stated a bunch of hard facts. I've extrapolated from that hard fact. I've come to a conclusion, and I put the conclusion out for debate with a question mark. That's not wrong. So I don't go out there saying, oh, I must be, this. No, I must be objective about the facts, not about my own opinion. That's the nature of a talk show.
Good morning. First of all, a disclaimer, I'm an ardent fan of you, so please don't mistake me for this question. In your big list, you missed out on important word, prostitute. And do you feel bad when the viewers or readers have such a perception about the media? From Times Now to the Hindu to the Indian Express, everywhere, whenever there is an incident, say for example, one special community which cannot be named kills an Hindu, there will be two customers, there are two people, two killed, all these things will come. And vice versa, they will say, in fact, in a case, one Ayurveda pharmacy holder, he killed his wife, he was a Muslim, but the headline was, Ayurveda pharmacy owner kills his wife. And secondly, in Times Now, sorry, not Times Now, Times of India, once when a Muslim cleric made some misdeed, they said it is tantric, and they had a man with a saffron robe. And after outrage, they changed the picture.
Right.
And if this is happening, why shouldn't we have such taglines for media?
Okay,
Sorry.
so you came to this conclusion about the perceived bias of Times of India by reading the headline, right? You don't have to subscribe to it. It's a free open market. But why label it?
Sorry, not just Times Now, every media, of course.
No. I'm talking about anyone. Why sit and label their journalism? Don't subscribe to it if you think that they are not objective with the facts. Don't subscribe, it's a free market. But why sit there and say such and such? And if you do want to, you can. Does it bother us? No. What bothers me is when my own colleagues in the larger fraternity start saying the same, without any basis. That's really when it becomes problematic, because you wouldn't want to get into the gutter and respond. I never do. And many people have said, you should, hey, Twitter follower bahut badh jayega. I said, I don't need that, I'm not going to get there and so I just leave it to the public. If you think that we're all prostitutes, good for you. If you don't think we're prostitutes, great. I'm not going to sit there and give you a whole reason why you shouldn't think I'm a prostitute. If a minister wants to say it, good luck to him. That's it. Yeah.
Rahul ji, namaste.
We have just
There is
5
another-
more minutes, and please keep your questions really brief. 30 seconds.
There is another dangerous trend where we see the state chief ministers themselves. I mean, we saw 2 examples appearing, in advertisements practically every 5 minutes across channels. We have not seen across the country so far, thankfully, only restricted to 2 very glorious members. So I'm taking the question from where the member left off there. So there is on one side the perception of the owners of the media houses putting some constraints, but here we see something very blatant, something very, very unthinkable, that the state chief ministers themselves every 5 minutes appearing, and I can imagine the amount of money that is being pumped for these activities. So 2 things. To what extent this is forcing the media houses, maybe in your experience or others, to block out unfavorable news of theirs. Second, where is this kind of money coming from? I mean, are they using the state resources for their personal means? I mean, it is really getting very dangerous.
Okay, there are 3 elements to your question. So the first one is that, look, we are running a service. It's okay to be paid for that service. The public in India doesn't pay you for their service. Most often, and I include myself here, when a newspaper tells me I can't read their article beyond this much without subscribing, I say, forget it, man. So be ready to pay. if you really want news which you perceive is agenda-less, then start paying for the news. This is not altruism. I'm being absolutely dead honest. I also take a salary. I want to be paid. I'm sure you take a salary, you want to be paid. Do you ask your employer where he got his money from? Most often, he might have had stashes of black money, which is being recycled and given to you, but you won't hold them. And I agree, why? After all, we're slightly different level of responsibility. But the second aspect to your question is an important one. Once you accept an advertisement, and the proviso is that you flash it as an advertorial, you don't say that this is part of your programming. If you accept an advertisement, are you going to be now, is your editorial dog being wagged by the Chief Minister's money tail? That's the part that we should be careful about. That's where we should be focusing. Does that happen? There will always be, as I said, governments who will, whether at the center or at the state level, who will have problems with your editorial agenda. They might threaten you with arrest. I've got 6 or 7 cases by a chief minister of Bengal who thinks that she's the one who's flying the flag for free speech in this country, but on very trivial, idiotic issues. But they'll never be watered down. I know that. There was one chap, a MP who jumped the counter and tried to manhandle some Indigo employees. He sent the police force to arrest me. I had to run from my home at 6 in the morning. They were banging on my doors. I slipped out of the back. They would have taken me to some godforsaken part of Andhra and locked me up somewhere. So, they will threaten you in other ways. Now, you have to, as I'm saying, draw the line. And if you tell them where to get off a couple of times, I think at some point they also need you. They also want to get that message across. So if you say that, look, we're not for sale, they'll have to live with it. And most often, they do. There are some who will pull out advertisements, and then they realize, oh gosh, we're not in the conversation. The Congress party doesn't send its spokespeople to Times Now. But now I'm told that they are thinking that they lost out. We don't want them back. Not because of, we've got something against them, but I now fear my ratings will go down because we've done very well without them. Nonetheless, I'm just joking. Yes.
Rahul,
yeah.
one question, especially about, because you're talking about the talk shows. And somewhere I find that it is not just the society. These talk shows are also caught in some kind of binaries. Because you don't have, you are already pre-decided, the sites, and it's more a debate format. And how far it is constraining the genuine, because one is you are not controlling what your panelist is going to do. And having those 7-8 windows and already pre-decided position on certain issues, it's very difficult to get into nuances. So somewhere I feel people are fed up with this kind of format. But my real question is, how far, it puts certain restrictions, because you are already getting into binaries and thinking in binaries. You enjoy writing, sometimes I feel, because I'm basically from print media, because it allows you to give your, thinking in a more comprehensive and more inclusive fashion rather than getting into those binaries. So this is one. And secondly, we are seeing binaries in media houses also. The journalist fraternity is being divided into national, anti-national, Modi-ater, Modi-Bhakt, whatever you want to call it. How far this is constraining the genuine media activity?
No, that's my whole conversation is about the fact that your own fraternity targets you because you don't agree with them. So it becomes more and more difficult for you to take a stand that might even, for example, challenge the government at the center or at the state level, because then you fear the backlash and you find that you don't have anyone standing with you. So as I said, after a point, people who have, a sort of lesser, I suppose, appetite for risk will just throw in the towel. But coming back to your first point, I don't think TV is added to division in society. I mean, we had, I think it was Dr. Ranganathan telling us yesterday how a particular government thought in binaries about certain books and films. I mean, they said they banned some. That's a binary. Someone liked it, someone didn't like it. They did it for a political purpose because a large number of people they thought might have supported them because they did so. That's a binary. So binaries have existed. I don't think TV, and look, today with social media, we've just had, the promoter of Coup. I mean, they're doing a lot more, presenting different facets of the conversation. You tweet right now, I think 60% of your tweets will have people disagreeing with you, the responses, and 40% will agree with you, and that's a binary, and that's a conversation. And I don't think we should be scared of binaries. I think what we should be scared of, really, is this sort of unspoken self-censorship that is going on because journalists themselves are intimidated by their own fraternity, and I think that's ridiculous, and I think that people who are doing it, for whatever reasons I've explained, need to really introspect.
We have actually run out of time, but we will take one last question.
Yeah. So one politically correct question and one politically incorrect question, sir.
Please.
So your friendly competitor channel, when Bengal elections was there, they went to Bangla as Republic Bangla. There is a 50-year-old change that's happening here. The Dravidian philosophy is getting challenged here in Tamil Nadu. When will we see Tamil, Times Now Tamil? We have great Malan sirs and others are available here, but when can we see Times Now coming to Tamil? This is politically correct question. Incorrect question, one of your ex-colleagues, when during the same COVID time was unceremoniously put in prison, why the fraternity didn't come and support? Or at least from outside perspective, we saw there was no one supporting. And now the recent changes in Maharashtra is clearly telling that he was vindicted. So I would leave that to you to answer.
Okay, so now the second part of your question I'll answer very quickly. The first part I'll have to refer to the board that will decide on how we expand and where we expand, even if we have the money to expand. But the second part, look, as I said, this is the essence of what I was saying, that we're so divided today as a fraternity, and I'm sure it has happened in the past. I'm not saying it hasn't, but there is I'm told from people I've spoken to who have, served the profession much longer than I have, that it's particularly bad now because there's an existential crisis for one whole group. It's not just the fact that they are not being given due attention by the government, that they are not called to a lunch and a dinner or given a sinecure or this or that. It's their way of thinking that is being challenged. And they are fighting this battle. And they don't want to hear the other side because then they will be completely irrelevant, even as journalists, even as commentators. So there is this battle going on, and that is what is contributing to this complete dissolution of a sense of fraternity. I'm not making too much out of it. We are a competitive lot of people. In every profession, you have competition. But there comes a time when you need to sort of forget about those things and say, look, at the end of the day, what is it that we set out to do? To present a point of view without it being sort of colored by, money and taint and, pressure and this, that, the other. But you can only do it if you all agree that that's what you're there for. If one side is only fighting a battle of relevance and wanting to be invited and, consulted on decisions and, want to be part of some big famous darbar, then there's a problem. Because, look at, I was reading a few days back a column by a former journalist. I don't know if I'm saying former because I don't know if she's a journalist anymore, but anyhow, she wrote this piece saying that Central Hall, is now off limits to all of us. And the Women's Press Corps, the building it was housed in, the government is wanting it back. And I was like, so why would you want the government to pay for your office, where you meet? I mean, why would you, Narasimha Rao might have done that as a great favor to look good. Or because he was a benefactor. Well, why do you want a subsidized house from the government? Why do you want, I don't have a PIB card because someone told me that a lot of journalists don't want the PIB card just for access. They actually want it because it comes with certain trappings. The moment someone told me that, I might be completely ill-informed. Usually am sometimes about these things. I said, I don't want it. If it's some sort of, doorway to X or Y, something I might get, don't want it. A lot of journalists have been part of various, got co-opted. They're secret card-carrying members of certain parties, and then they suddenly emerge like submarines just before elections and become, nothing wrong with that, But as long as they didn't allow all of that to sort of influence what they were saying, that's what, but why would you want these sort of handouts? Why do you want to be on the Prime Minister's plane? I mean, I can tell you, I went for just one, and I never wanted to go again. This is in 2007. And we went on this very Ponzi tour of Germany, and we were taken to this beer garden, and then we were taken to a lovely Michelin-starred or whatever it was, some celebrated chef's restaurant, and I never paid a penny. And I asked somebody, I said, so who's paying for this? Is this going to go back to the company? Because my DA is actually only at that time. So they said, no, it's all taken care of, relax. And I felt that, that's junketeering, and there's no free lunch, right? So I said, I'm not very comfortable with this arrangement. And I vainly sort of brought it up with the XP then, MEAs, I don't want to name names. And I said to him, listen, this is my 20 euros, would you like it? Because it's just something that makes me feel better about the lunch. I'll probably enjoy it more. He said, no, it's okay, man. It's okay, it's fine. Just relax. Don't make a song and dance about these things. So I don't understand that. Maybe I'm trying to be a little too virtuous. I don't mean to sound like some, I've also made mistakes on air. I've put out news which, turned out to be wrong in this mad scramble to get it out there first. It happens. But I've sort of not tried to meet many people. I've tried to sort of, stay a little untainted by all of this, if the word can be used. So I think we shouldn't really get so, worked up about these things, as long as at the end of the day you can justify what you do to yourself. Yeah, thank you.